Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. And before we begin our introductions, we are announcing on a contest. Deadline is January 31st, 2016. Win a prize from Right Pack Radio. Are you a fan of science fiction or science fantasy? Here's your chance to find out more about your favorites. We're giving a nifty prize to the person who sends us the longest list of science fiction, science fantasy authors who were born or died in the month of January. For each valid listing, you must include the author's name, place of birth, date of death, and date of birth. I'm sorry, I reversed that, but and your listing. Yes. We're going to ask that you send that to us. We will have a email address posted on our website along with the rules of this contest.
Give the website.
And our Facebook website, you can find it on Facebook. I don't have I'm sorry, I'm being coached here from the side by one of our lovely panelists, and unfortunately Facebook does not give a www.facebook.com/something easy to know.
But we're just Right Pack Radio, aren't we?
No, actually it's got some weird numbers in there before you get to
Right Pack Radio 12976.
Search for Right Pack Radio. You'll probably find it.
69, 21.
Yep. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. And the quarterback's been knocked down. Okay. So, that was my first attempt, but we're going to continue anyway. So, this is your host, David Allen Lucas, president of St. Louis Writers Guild, author of, we'll find out what's coming out soon, and I'm still searching for
mystery author, you can't tell.
Yes.
It's a mystery what's coming out.
And science fiction, and usually combining them. And with me today is my lovely co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe, paranormal romance writer under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and wearer of shirts.
Wearer of shirts?
I hope you're wearing something.
Thank you. No, there's this weird part of me that's like, do we have to wear shirts?
I mean,
He's like, well...
okay, yes. Moving right along.
Brad R. Cook. I am the author of steampunk novels and blogs and other such stuff. But you can find Iron Horseman and Iron Zulu out there in the world right now, in ebook, in print. Check them all out at bradarcook.com.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and coming out soon from 5 Star is Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And now I've been demoted a little bit. I am now vice president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
But only because she timed out. They wanted her as vice president because they could not have her as president anymore.
Oh, you're so right, Kathleen.
I'm Melanie Claney, author of nonfiction, science fiction, and fantasy.
Lee Savage, author of paranormal erotic romance and under the name Carrie Lee Williams, children's stories.
And to be honest, when Kathleen talked about wearer of shirts and how that question came up, I was like, yeah, erotic romance. Moving right along. But today we're not talking about erotic romance. I'm sorry for anybody who just tuned in.
Wearer of shirts came from Brendan Urie, the lead singer of Panic at the Disco, when he was introducing a bandmate.
Okay.
And he is quite a character himself, so I thought it appropriate.
Okay, I take your word for it.
Now introduce the episode and people will get what I meant.
Okay, today's
episode. We're
episode.
drinking mead and it'll all make sense.
Yes, we are doing an Agatha Christie's Wake and talking about Right Pack Radio's Step 1, our first rule of writing, which is characters. And we are drinking mead.
Yes. Before we do that, let me tell you about why I wanted to do this in the first place. And yes, if you want to blame somebody for the drunkenness around here and this episode in general, you'll have to blame me.
Thank you,
She
Fedora.
did bring the mead.
Yeah, nobody's drunk yet, by the way, just making it official.
But they are softened up a little, and that was the real idea, actually. Because A former student of mine, who is a wonderful person that I still correspond with and see from time to time, named Judy, wrote me and said that she loved my last book and was looking forward to my next one. And she'd love to treat me to lunch and get some advice because she wants to write a book. Okay. Well,
You didn't dissuade her of that.
No.
Okay.
I need the floor here for quite a while.
Go for it.
just
I'm really
everybody
sure.
shut up, all right?
Okay, well, your host has been told to hush.
Yes, just hush. Well, Judy, I can give you advice if you want to write a book, and it is very simple. It's write a book. There is no substitution for actually getting out and
Good advice.
doing the damn thing. Is that right? Am I
advice.
right?
Good
I'm
advice.
right. But
I'd agree, but I'm hushed.
let's say that you're interested in selling a book. Well, the thing to do there, the advice is pretty simple, though it might be rather long term, and it is to go out and find other writers. It is to join writers groups. If you write mystery, join Sisters in Crime. If you write romance, join romance writers. If you write anything else, like poetry or nonfiction, well, join the Writers Guild, St. Louis and the state. And you will find out by drips and drabs lots and lots of information. But of course, I know that's not what Judy wants. She wants a more personal touch. She wants me to teach her how to write a book. But gee, Judy, I can't do that. I just can't do that. It would take way too much time. But then I got a bright idea. I have some writer friends, and they have a podcast, and it just might be possible for us to address some of your issues, at least, on our podcast. And I thought, well, gee, okay, I'll soften them up first, and the best way I know to do that is with some booze. And what's the best excuse for booze that I can think of? Well, hey, I'm about half Irish, so the obvious thing is a wake.
We need an excuse?
Well, you've got, well, for a wake, you've got to have booze. I mean,
Yes.
There's just no way
Especially
not
an Irish
to.
way.
And so, I brought a bottle of mead today.
It's good mead.
And
It is.
it couldn't be any more relevant
That's what it was.
because not only is it the genuine thing from Shannon Airport Duty Free in Ireland, it is also named after, or the town was maybe named after, Jane Marple's sweet little town. Where did she live, everybody? St. Mary Mead. Isn't that perfect? Am I clever?
I like it.
Oh, I'm so clever. Well, anyway, so you can see by the jollity around the table that it's taking effect fairly well. And I'm real happy about that. And from time to time, I feel certain somebody is just going to burst out with a salute to Agatha Christie. Don't you think so? Everybody, nod. Say yes.
Yes.
Agatha Christie.
All right, to Agatha Christie.
To the Queen of Crime, may her reign always be in our memories.
Clink, clink, clink.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah, we're drinking out of plastic cups here,
Yeah.
so no clinking sounds on the
Yeah,
radio.
well,
We
We can
Thanks.
create them. Clink.
you can do
If you hadn't said it, no one would have known that clinking wasn't clinking.
What clinking?
Clinking.
Okay.
Clink, clink, clink.
Yes, we're getting married. Okay. Go ahead.
So we are toasting the death of Agatha Christie. And true, it has been some time back, but it was in the month
Was
of
it on the
January.
Nile? Sorry.
It was not on the Nile. It was actually not on today's date, because
Yeah.
I don't know when this is going to air,
Yeah,
but is it going to air on the 12th? She died on the 12th, actually.
It is. I'll take a
Is
look.
Tuesday.
So no.
Okay,
No.
so we're close, though.
Yes.
We're close,
We're close enough.
We're close enough.
Close enough for an Irish wake. That's all that matters.
That's all it takes.
It's in the same month.
They could spend weeks
Exactly,
doing that.
exactly.
Even before the person died, maybe. I don't know.
Exactly.
Anyway, we are having a wake for Agatha Christie. And, celebrating her death is not a new thing.
No.
When she actually died, they dimmed the lights in London on the West End, where all the theaters are, for an hour. And on the 25th anniversary of her death, they had a really big party. So they had a big wake then, many years after she was dead. So I feel perfectly justified in having a wake for her right now. You think I'm right?
Yes.
Sure.
Oh, yes, I'm right.
It's the sign of a good writer when people are willing to drink for you at any hour of the day.
You know it.
Well,
That's
and
my
then
goal. Squad goal.
By the way, just, I know I'm hushed, but I'm not going to hush for a second. We'll talk about just how big of an impact, say, a certain event that she had appeared in newspapers around at least all of England and into the Americas.
Oh, yes.
We made a
yes,
Doctor
you
Who
can tell
episode
all
about it.
that.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, now I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty. When I want us all to try to help Judy with what I really think she wants me to do is teach her how to write a book from beginning to end.
Okay.
And I don't know that I'm even going to be able to persuade you to go any further than today with this, but I think we might tackle the very first thing. That is the most basic thing that every writer has to do in writing a book. And I don't care whether it's fiction, what genre it is. I do not care whether it is about real people or not real people, whether it's fiction, nonfiction. If you don't have characters that are compelling, that get people's interest, that is the main reason why editors will say no to your book, because they'll say the characters are bland. The characters just didn't grab me. And so your most basic job as a writer is to create delicious characters that folks want to read about.
Before I turn it over to Brad and then Kathleen, I was going to say real quick, there are a lot of how-to books out there on writing characters. Some of them are good, some of them, maybe it's too much. And this is a true part of the art, is creating that character and make it living.
Well, I think so long as we can talk to Judy and a lot of other people out there, then I think we'll go through the entire
That's
list.
right. It might help some other
Yeah,
people
so long as
too.
it's not just only Judy. Not that I don't
Well,
mind Judy, but
Judy's
talking
my
straight
problem.
to Judy. Talking straight to Judy now. I would say that not only do your main characters have to be this interesting and, well-rounded characters, but all of your characters, including the guy who just walks in with a glass of water, need to be interesting characters. In my novel, one of the things I love is that my side characters are actually some of my favorite characters, and I find as many ways that I can push them into the story as possible, simply because I love them so much, and my readers tend to love them as well. So I just want to throw that out there, that not only do your main characters have to be awesome and well-rounded, but it helps if the majority of your characters are awesome and well-rounded.
All right. So I wanted to reiterate before we launch into the discussion proper that we are talking about books like novel length or novella, I'm guessing, not short stories. Because with short stories, some of these things pertaining to characters will be different depending on the type you're writing. But with a book, you need well-rounded characters. You need fleshed-out characters. And
But
on
short
that
stories should
note,
still have interesting characters.
yes. But on that note, I think we should
But just
read the
fewer of
rule.
them mostly, I think.
Yeah. Should we read the rule? Or
Go for it.
Go for it.
I think you should do the honors, Fedora.
Well, all right. Let me put my glasses on and do it. The first thing that I believe, and this partly comes from a lot of other rules that we've been talking about over the course of the last 2 years. We have often done rules by Elmore Leonard and Stephen King and Pixar. So I have kind of combined these things together, picking out what I think are the most important points that they agree upon, and here's the list. We'll take them a little bit at a time, though. All characters need, and your protagonist, that's your hero or heroine, must, 1, have an inner goal beyond mere desire, something they must have to feel complete, an itch they keep trying to scratch but can't quite reach. But they must make progress toward it during the course of the book. Hello, what did that floor everybody?
No, I thought you were-
Rest of them.
Yeah.
Oh.
We got a couple others listed here.
Okay.
Then we'll go through.
Two.
Yeah, go through them all, then we'll come back.
All right.
Okay.
Be likable. No matter how many evil acts a character might commit, he or she must be lovable enough to make the reader care. And 3, be believable. Have flaws we recognize as human. Hold opinions. Face problems and challenges common to people so we can identify with the character.
We got 2
Four.
more. They have to want something in every scene.
And 5.
They have to test characters by throwing obstacles in their way, and pain they must endure.
Now, I'm not so sure about want something in every scene, because maybe that's true about your one main character, but
No, I would say it's all your characters.
Yep.
Like I said about the guy who's bringing in a glass of water, even though he's never going to appear in the book ever again, and he's there literally just to set a glass of water down on the table and walk away, that guy has a story. And the point is that, he has to want something in every scene, so he has to want to deliver that water in that scene. Now, granted, yes, for your other characters, it's a much, much higher level of want and a much, much higher level of, what is happening to them in that scene. But every character, I think, and it's a good way of making your characters well-rounded, is to know what those wants are.
And I'm glad you brought that back up, because it goes to my point that I wanted to bring earlier before we went off topic, was that you're doing yourself an injustice if you don't create the characters more rounded, because you might miss another story. Shadows of My Past that I wrote came about because the characters in the first book decided they wanted their own story. And in fact, a couple other characters from that first book decided they want their own story, and that's what I'm currently working on. So you could end up missing a whole nother story if you didn't develop your characters to the point that they wanted.
William Faulkner created a whole big county with all kinds of weird characters in it. And that was his claim to fame, that he could create characters and stories and interlace them so that they all made sense, or just one at a time would make sense.
The characters and what they want, since we're also doing Agatha Christie's Wake, I'm going to throw out a criticism of Dame Christie that's been given.
You're going to criticize the Dame?
But I'm going to explain something along with it that those critics don't necessarily always catch. Dame Christie was always blamed of creating her characters to be kind of like chess pieces who moved across the board in a certain fashion, a certain way. She was doing that partially because she was showing society, that society at that time. The other part, though, is every character had a role to play. It didn't matter if it was a guy, to borrow Brad for a moment, a waiter walking in to deliver a glass of water, or if it was her great detectives, Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot. And in fact, probably what drove that fact home to me the most was I was watching a play, one of her plays, Black Coffee. And this was done at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis. The entire play is occurring basically on one set, and the floor of that set, it's basically like drawing room or parlor or some kind. I forget the details exactly, but there's one part. And the entire floor is a chessboard. It is white and black marble. Now, at first, you don't, unless you kind of knew about this criticism, you don't catch it. But the murder occurs, basically a guy drank coffee and died. Murder occurs, lightning occurs, all the lights go off. 2 doors open, and out steps Hercule Poirot. Lights come on, and you see him literally descending onto the chessboard. And that's how the role is done.
This is actually one of the reasons my 2 favorite Agatha Christie's are Death on the Nile and then 12 Angry Men, I think it is, that actually is Murder on the Orient Express, the movie. Anyway, the reason I love these movies so much is that...
Wait a minute, 12 Angry Men? I didn't think that was like...
Is it
No.
just
It's not a criticism.
Murder on the Orient Express?
Order on the Orient Express.
Okay,
12
sorry,
Angry Men
my
is...
apologies.
It's different.
Okay, but it's the same basic thing where they're like 12 guys on a train and they're all there to kill them.
12 Angry Men's about a jury.
Yeah. But so I got
Murder on the
the
Orient Express.
yeah, it's
Okay,
Murder on the Orient
Express.
Express. I thought the book and movie were titled differently. Good to know they're not. But anyway, the reason why I love both of these movies is because one takes place on a boat running up the Nile, and literally the majority of the story takes place there, and it's just running around from room to room. And then the other one obviously takes place on a train, and you go from car to car, and I love the idea that the set pieces for these are so tiny. It keeps all the characters right there together. There's an interesting interaction. Both the boat and the train become characters within the novel themselves or in the movies themselves. So it's one of the things I actually love about it, is that that sense she has of kind of laying out all the characters, laying out the scene.
And then there were None, I think is the name of the one
Really?
that was also retitled 12 Millennials.
Was trying to say that.
Yeah.
And Then There Were None is my favorite Agatha Christie book. 12 Little Indians, formerly titled 12 Little Something We Can't Use the Word For. But that is also a very much a closed set. People are isolated on an island and someone is killing people. There are only 10 of them, so it's got to be one of them, they think. Unless it's somebody from outside.
That can't get there, technically.
So that was a great way of doing it. But one of the things that I liked about that book was the murderer, who I'm not going to spoil. The murderer seems like it should be obvious, having read the full story, based on what kind of character they had, what kind of character they were. But she creates the rest of the cast in such a way that you're never quite sure who it is. And at the end, you're wondering, did I miss something really important? Like, because the last person, you're not sure if... You're sure they're not the murderer. So what happened? Because everyone else is dead. But yeah, I love the way... Oh my goodness, that book is amazing. I'm rambling. I'm blaming the mead. Who's going next?
I've got something to talk about character with Agatha Christie real quick, but then I can turn it over to
Well,
you.
I
You
think
can go
it's
first.
time for a wake break. And a wake break is a salute to Agatha in something specific, and I want to salute her top 3 because you mentioned 2 of her top 3.
There's a third
Then
one.
There Were None is her all-time bestseller.
Yes.
Her second is Murder on the Orient Express, but you have not yet mentioned her third top one, and it is anybody? The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Oh,
That is
Really?
her third one, and so here's
Okay.
to you. Salute you, Agatha.
Salute to
Woohoo!
Agatha.
Clinkety
I mean,
clank.
I've read
Clink,
that
clink,
one, but
clink,
it's... In fact, I've read it recently, but... Okay, wouldn't have been my pick for favorite.
All right, so we did...
No, that
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Go on.
I was saying before she took it. One, I want to just, now, try and get my thoughts back. An example of Agatha Christie's use of character, and this is a big character. This is not a minor character. This is actually Hercule Poirot, one of her main detectives, named Hercule after Hercules. In fact, if I remember right, her first short stories were based on the 12 Labors of Hercules. But I want to talk about Hercule's last case, Curtain. Does anybody here know it besides Fedora? Does anybody know what Hercule does in that book? No. Hercule Poirot, knowing that the villain would get away with further murders and further destruction, commits murder. He had a, if I remember right, a heart disease where he's having to take pills. And what he does is he actually disguises himself to look like someone else, kills a bad guy. Yes, I'm spoiler alert. Kills a bad guy.
Late.
Too late. Goes back and he just chooses not to take his meds, so eventually he'll die of this condition he's got. And leaves a note. But understanding Hercule Poirot, knowing that justice is his number one goal of everything, you can understand why he actually commits this murder and sacrifices himself to do so. Go ahead. That's the role of characters. Sorry.
I think that's a good segue to talking about the first point of characters. Have an inner goal beyond mere desire, something they must have to feel complete, an itch they keep trying to scratch but can't quite reach, but that they make progress toward during the course of the book. For Poirot, it's justice. And there's a character in a novel I'm writing who, her inner goal is family. It's not explicit, and it's not something that, like, comes up in the book in any kind of tangible way, but I know that's what drives her. And because I know that's what drives her, when she makes mistakes that are, detrimental to her and to other people, it's because she's trying to create the family that she never really got, trying to create that family bonding experience. So, in the case of the novel I'm writing, she allows herself to be lied to and manipulated, and she's doing it because she's trying to become part of a group. trying to form those bonds that she unconsciously needs. And knowing that about her allows me to write her better. So, what are some of the inner goals in your characters? Like, some of you guys have books out right now. Like, what about some of those? What are some of the things that drive those characters?
But before you get onto that, that was just sorry, that was just pointed out. Good point. Sometimes the character doesn't know what their desires are.
Yeah.
Not at first.
Or
Yeah.
in my case, it's usually lust. So, but turns to love.
Not to mention blood. Blood.
In my case, it is a young woman who wants to be her own woman and not just get shoved around by Victorian society, which most women, in fact, practically all women do.
What about
That would
you?
be one of my side characters, actually. My main character in Iron Horseman and Iron Zulu, he is kind of destined to be a bookworm. That's where his father has pushed him and everything else, but he wants a life of adventure. And so it's that juxtaposition between the two, because he is much more of a book nerd than he is an adventurer, but through the course of the novels goes on these crazy adventures.
Does knowing the character's inner desires, does it help you write them better?
Oh,
And
yes.
does it get them
You
into
have to
trouble?
know that.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a sine qua non. You must.
And even if the character doesn't know, which is totally fine, the writer needs to know, because that's where you're writing towards.
How does it enrich your character?
Well, for me, my character wants to be a knight more than anything in the world. Yet when he finally gets to the point where he's becoming a knight, he starts to question whether or not that's really what he wants. Now, in the end, I know what he wants, and I'm writing that book right now. But the reality is that for the first 2 books, he's kind of flip-flopping back and forth between what he really wants. He knows he wants the girl, but he can't have her. He knows he wants to be a knight, but then when he gets there, it's not really what he thought it would be. He wants to be an adventurer, but adventuring is actually really hard and tough and not the joyous expression that he thought it was going to be. So he's going on the kind of this back and forth the whole time, but to me it's a straight line. I just watch him bounce back and forth from each side. So, knowing that has made it kind of easy to write too, but then being able to play with it as well and knowing how to push him in certain directions. And then he goes certain directions.
One of the things that Fedora wrote was make progress toward it during the course of the book. So, I know in my novel that is not out, so you can't read it. I'm sorry, everyone.
Soon.
So, one of the things that I know is that because she's seeking to form a family, and I'm kind of forming a family for her, she's making mistakes because she's trying to form this thing that she doesn't know that she needs. But her ability to make progress toward it is part of bringing other characters into her life and how she interacts with them. So how do you guys have your characters make progress toward these internal needs, these internal goals that they're trying to
Well,
get scratched?
First off, I'm going to go back to Brad for a second, and using his example, and another way of saying it is you've got a character, sometimes a character thinks they know what they want, and it's not really what they're after. And that's one way of doing it. And it's showing them as they're going through their perils and adventures what they really do want, discovering it. Second one, and the current book I'm working on, basically the character has run away from what their goal is going to be because they think they've got a completely different goal in life. Their goal is they're going to have to basically move back home and take on the role of their father. But her role in life, she thinks, is to be a wanderer. She doesn't want anything to do with civilization. And so she's on the run. Go ahead, and then I'm not sure who's Fedora.
I was going to say, so the characters' inner goals and their stated goals can differ.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, for
That's called good storytelling.
and so also we've concluded, it seems, a character can think they know what they want, but be trying to get something else, whether they recognize it or not, because what they need is something different. And that's okay. That's part of good storytelling. You just have to know, as the author, what the character needs and what they think they want and what they actually want.
I think an important aspect of it all is not character in the sense of writing a character, but character in the sense of having a personality that has strengths to it. That is, they have to have their own principles. And following those principles can sometimes be just crushing. You can follow your principles to the point where you drive everyone away from you and find yourself left with nothing but emptiness except your principle that you still have. And so treading any kind of fine line or managing to get by at all can be a great challenge for any character, and that's the kind that I think are compelling to readers.
Alexander, the main character in my novel, wants to be a great knight. He wants to be Alexander the Great. You know, but the reality is that in terms of the people he's around, he's actually probably the worst warrior there. You know, he's got a great mind, and he's probably the most brilliant character in the books. But the reality is he's not the best warrior. You know, Genevieve is a way better warrior than he'll ever be. However, he really wants it. He has a heart, you know, that really drives him in that way. So he's constantly kind of bouncing back, and his father, you know, no one wants him to be that great warrior except for him and a few other people. So the reality is he's kind of in this constant struggle, and that struggle is the tension and the conflict and everything else that kind of draws the reader through. Now, at the end of the second book, he kind of makes a final choice as to whether or not he's going to be a warrior, you know, or what. And I won't ruin that for anyone to read it. But the point is that, you know, knowing that, you know, having that kind of internal struggle is what's allowed me to kind of push him and drive him forward and, you know, really kind of create, as Fedora was saying, that greater sense of character throughout the novel. And then beyond him, the other characters within the novel also have it. You know, Genevieve has her own motivation. She has her own wants and desires that come forward. Even Mr. Singh, who's, you know, one of my central side characters, has these same kind of similar motivations where he wants something and is trying to move towards those goals. Whether they're always in the sync with what's going on is, you know, that's conflict and storytelling. But, yeah.
Did you still? No? Okay.
Is it on this point, you guys?
I have something on conflict.
All right, go for it.
Because I just wanted to mention your friend. Since not that long ago, she may want to look back at Trauma, How Much is Too Much, that we did, where we went into a whole episode about throwing obstacles at our characters, and I just thought that might be a great point on going further into testing your characters and throwing obstacles in their way.
Well, I am absolutely going to call Judy up and tell her that if she wants to learn how to write, she's got to listen to our podcast.
There you go.
That's right.
And now I think it's time for another wake break. Okay, this one is to Agatha Christie, outsold only by Shakespeare and the Bible.
Oh, wow.
Agatha!
Cling to that.
How far is she behind, or how far are the Harry Potter novels behind her?
I have no idea.
Because she wrote a lot more than the 7 or 8 books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or 9.
She wrote 80. Agatha Christie wrote 80.
Mm-hmm.
80 books, wow.
Yeah, imagine that.
60 of them were mysteries, by the way, for all of you mystery lovers out there.
So JK's got some writing to do.
Mm-hmm. So do we all.
I thought maybe we should move on to point number 2, that characters should be likable. No matter how many evil acts a character might commit, he or she must be lovable enough to make the reader care. And I thought what Fedora said about having a character who's driven by their inner goal to the point where they push everyone away was a good segue into that. So, I was going to ask a question, but there are 3 people who want to talk, so I'm just going to let some... How do you make a character who's driven all the other characters in the book away still likable?
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, no, you guys can go first. I don't mind.
Okay, as someone who wrote a serial killer, I would like to reword that is, if he's not likable, he should be good enough to hate.
He should be, compelling? Is
Compelling
that
enough
that you like
to
better?
hate.
You want terrible things to happen to him.
Yes, so when he meets his
must
demise,
be
you don't feel sorry for him.
Compelling enough to make the reader care? Is that
To hate him.
okay?
You either want to love them or hate them. You don't want any characters that are in between that they just really don't care about. They really gotta... And my serial killer is motivated. He has his own motivations, and in a way, you know, you have to have a reason that he's doing this. So you have to express that. For him, he saw his wife, who was pregnant with his child, get murdered by a vampire. So in his mind, he thought he should kill everyone with any type of magical powers, thinking they were vampires. But in his mind, but in reality, he was only killing people that had psychic powers. Because there was no way he could actually kill a real vampire. He was too drunk and weak most of the time. So,
Well, to that point, I'm just going to throw out one of my favorite bad guys out there is William Atherton, who's in such fine films as Die Hard and Die Hard 2 and Ghostbusters and others.
Yeah.
Was he the jerk in Ghostbusters?
Yes,
He's the jerk in
and he's the jerk in Die Hards. Yes, so he literally plays one of the most hated characters in like dozens of movies. And as much as I despise William Atherton, I have to give him some credit because no matter what he does, he generally is the villain I cannot stand and hate to this day. So there is something to the effect of somebody who's so good that I hate them so much. They've evoked an emotion in me, and if your character can do that, that's an amazing thing. However, on the likable side, I'm going to throw out the giant juggernaut in the universe right now, Star Wars. I love Kylo Ren. I love his giant temper tantrums. And this isn't a spoiler for anyone who's out there, but he throws some epic temper tantrums with his lightsaber. Just chopping up everything around him to the point where stormtroopers are literally turning around and walking the other way.
Because stormtroopers got smarter.
It is hilarious.
Don't spoil me, guys.
Don't worry, no spoilers, like I said. But yeah, so it is hilarious what they do. So temper tantrums, very good.
Thanks for that, Brad. I haven't seen the movie yet, Brad.
It's a reason
I've
to see
only
the movie.
seen
Trust me,
the
he hasn't
previews.
destroyed it.
It's a reason to see the movie.
Thanks for the spoilers, Brad.
Okay.
I think
There's no
should amend-
spoilers. I didn't tell you why we had temper tantrums.
He told me he was having him. I think
That's
we
epic.
should.
It's hilarious.
No, actually,
I
if
think
I
we should
can.
amend the rule very quickly. Be likable or compelling enough.
Got it.
If I can.
We already did it.
Must
Yes.
arouse emotion. We got that.
This is from, actually I'm quoting, because I actually find this character to be a great example of how to make an antagonist. You asked how can you make them likable. This is from the article, Kilgrave is Marvel's best on-screen villain yet, from Vulture.com. Written November 2015. I'm not going to read the article to you guys. I'm just going to touch on, just give the lines, if you will. First off, his endgame is intensely personal. Now, if you haven't seen Jessica Jones on Netflix, I would recommend you do this. And the only reason why I'm going to say that is David Tennant, I think, really hits this character's role out of the park. Second thing is his humanity. Third, now I'll explain something about Kilgrave. Kilgrave is actually able to control people with his mind, basically. And he never knows if somebody is doing something because they want to do it for him or because he's forced them to. And it becomes a decision. That's something he always fights with. And Kilgrave's power taps into a primal human fear. Let me skip that one. Skip that. He has an unpredictability, and very much so. The devil is in the details of how you create your characters.
I wanted to bring up a couple characters that shouldn't necessarily be likable, but are. And there are some kinds of characters that I think are compelling by definition. You mentioned serial killers, Lee. Serial killers, America is fascinated with. And there are characters in TV shows, crime TV shows, that are serial killers, like Criminal Minds. They generally just deal with serial killers for the most part.
Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter, serial killer. Dexter, serial killer. The thing is, we like Hannibal Lecter and we like Dexter,
I
even though
don't
we
like
know.
either one of those guys.
I don't either, but go ahead.
Let me rephrase.
They're
are
popular.
compelling.
Yeah,
They are
They are
compelling.
compelling. We see them and we are fascinated in some capacity by these characters. If you look at the ratings and how long Dexter ran, definitely fascinated. If you look at Silence of the Lambs and how many books came out, well, there's 3 books, I believe, relating to that set of characters. And then
There's a TV
they
show
made
now.
Silence of the Lambs, they made a TV show about Hannibal.
Red Dragon.
Sometimes the book Silence of the Lambs has been made into a movie. We're on our 4th or 5th movie of that book.
Exactly.
Really, I didn't know
And
that.
Oh, yeah.
so
They
like,
don't have
these-
Hannibal in the title. Is
No,
the
no,
whole
no.
thing.
Yeah.
But these characters are clearly fascinating to us, and as a society, we don't generally condone murder we don't generally condone murder. Yet we love vigilante killers and people like superheroes. We love these serial killers like Dexter who kills other serial killers. So you don't necessarily have to have a character that is straight off likable. Something that might be fun to do is to pick a type of character or a trait of a character that is reprehensible and figure out a way to make a person with that trait likable. In the books by Jennifer Estep, the Elemental Assassins books, the main character is an assassin. Generally, assassins kill people, and we don't necessarily like them for doing it. But this main character, we really, really love. She has, I think part of it is that she has a code. Mm-hmm. She has her own code. She has her own sense of morality. And when she takes a job, she does not take it to kill innocent people. If the person she feels is someone that the law's not going to touch, she'll do it pro bono. But she gets paid to kill people that go against her personal code because they've hurt other people, they've killed other people, and the law's not going to get anything done about it. So we like her as a person. When you read the books, which you totally should, you'll like her a lot. She's pretty badass. But that's one way of taking a character that has a trait or a quality that is not generally likable and making them relatable, making them compelling, making them likable. You give them a code of some kind. Dexter has a code as well. It's something to think about.
I'll also say something really fast. I'm going to borrow from Robert Louis Stevenson from the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think, is the... Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is correct. I think it's a strange case.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to go to the musical that was written about it, because they actually reworded Robert Louis Stevenson and made it a little bit stronger with this. And this is something which I remind myself whenever I'm making any protagonist or any antagonist. And if I can pull this off correctly, in each of us there are two natures. If this primitive duality of man, good and evil, could be housed in separate identities, life would be relieved of all that is unbearable. But it is a curse of mankind that these polar twins should be constantly struggling. No matter how evil your character is, there's still going to be some aspect of good. And no matter how goody two-shoes your character is, there's always that aspect of evil. And those powers are struggling inside the characters and should be shown off. I think that's one of the ways to make it personable and likable. And I don't know if you've got a dovetail, but I know Fedora's been waiting. Oh, dovetail to that. Okay.
I was...
Quick.
Dovetail, yeah. Okay. So the jerk in Ghostbusters thought he was protecting the city. Mm-hmm. That's all I was going to say.
Mm-hmm. Wake break.
Oh.
Agatha Christie. The longest running play ever. Do you know how long The Mousetrap has been running on the London stage? Since 1952. That is 64 years. Plus another 26 years in Toronto. And her will specifies that as long as it's running on the London stage, only one production per year can be anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And perhaps never on television or
film.
The movies, unless her descendants agree to it, because they have now power over her estate. But Agatha, oh, you got to admire that lasting power.
And one thing, too, if you don't know this about Mousetrap, the audience is technically sworn to keep it quiet as to who's responsible for the murder.
Oh, nice. No spoilers. I like that.
25,000 performances as of 2012.
But can't you buy a copy of the...
Yes.
You can buy a copy of the play?
Yes, but...
Okay.
That's not... Where's the fun?
It's not the same thing.
Where's the fun?
It's being in a theater and seeing it. Obviously, a lot of people agree with that.
And this is completely off the side for just a second. I'm just going to say, I did see it in London, and what I found... First off, the play was great. But second off, what I found really fun was, at the time, one of the actors was the same one who played Dr. Watson in Sherlock Holmes. This is prior to the Benedict Cumberbatch version. Sorry, a little bit too much meat there.
Yeah, blame the mead.
Blaming the meat on that one. Go ahead.
Are we ready to move on to point number 3, or do we have anything else to say? Like Luther, which I was surprised somebody didn't mention.
I thought I had talked about Luther too much in past episodes, but okay. And what's funny is, just since we don't have video, I was actually getting up and tossing something away and turned right around as soon as she said it. Mm-hmm. Luther is a British crime drama. It's all about chasing down serial killers for the most part.
It's Idris Elba. That's all you need to know.
Thank you, because I love that man's acting, but I can never pronounce his name. And I hate myself for not being able to do that. And by the way, there's at least one book out there that's a prequel to the TV series. Luther has a very rough road to go. I never talked about this part, in the opening TV episode, he actually lets a killer of children drop shib into their death. The guy ends up in coma, and I'm not going to tell you what eventually happens. But he actually lets that much of darkness come into him. He fights the darkness of what he's seeing as fighting serial killers, fighting the crimes, and trust me, people, the real things are... I've never worked one, but if you ever read anything written by anybody who has ever had, yeah, you can understand how you look into the abyss, and the abyss looks back. And the abyss looks back so hard into Luther that there's one episode that I remember the beginning of. It always kind of stands out. And at this point in time, Luther has lost his wife. He's suffering from basically post-traumatic stress, if you really want to look at it that way. And he is sitting outside of his apartment with a revolver with one bullet. His cell phone rings. It's work. Here they've got another case for him to work. He picks up the revolver, spins the cylinder, stops, pulls the trigger in his mouth. Click. Reaches over, answers the cell phone. That's how far he left the darkness in by that point. And at that point, I'll turn it back over.
So that's a very humanizing thing humanizing scene, I would think, for a character that doesn't seem like he's terribly likable in the show. Mm-hmm. Just to show that it really does hurt. So that's one way to make a character likable, I guess.
That's what I mean, showing his humanity. That's what I read off earlier, yeah.
But it's clear that Luther has flaws, which is the next thing we want to talk about. We need to write characters so that they're believable. They need to have flaws we recognize as human, hold opinions, face problems, and challenges that are common to people so we can identify with that character. Luther, it seems, has trouble dealing with his work because it's horrific. Uh-huh. And we don't all have horrific work lives, but I mean, that's something that we can all not identify with, sympathize with. Mm-hmm. And I think that probably helps make him not just sympathetic, but a little bit more believable, that we see that he is affected by what he does.
I wanted to say with this, because of writing vampires, that sometimes people can overlook that when they're writing their vampire characters, because they tend to want to make them all-powerful. And yes, usually they heal easy and they don't get hurt and they're super strong. So then you have to work on showing their emotional anguish, their emotional pain, to humanize them somewhat.
Actually, on that point, I would throw out the original Bram Stoker, who writes Dracula as a very flawed character, actually. Mm-hmm. Especially if you read the books or see some of the movies. Some of the other movies put him as an all-powerful guy, but Dracula is actually quite torn. Mm-hmm. Not only just through his power, but also the sense of being an immortal, the sense of never really being able to love or find love or being able to have connections with other people, and then just the dark nature of his own, being.
While I agree with everything you just said, the moody vampire is a cliche.
And speaking of that cliche...
Well, it's a cliche because it's been around since 1800.
Well, yeah, but it's overdone. Let's just put it that way.
Speaking of the cliche of the moody vampire... Were you going first? Speaking of the cliche of the moody vampire, as far as believability goes, in vampire stories, and stories where there are people who are especially long-lived, something that breaks the believability for me very quickly is if a person or a being who is, magical, paranormal in some way, who is more than 100 years old, sometimes more than 500 or more than 1,000 years old, does not act in a way that suggests they have the weight of all those years behind them. I am not generally a fan of the whole 100, 200, 500-year-old vampire falls in love with teenage girl thing. Because I'm like, how old are you pedophile? I'm sorry, I look at Twilight and I'm like, that guy's like your grandpa.
Oh, beyond.
Or your great-great-grandpa.
Yeah.
Like, what does he see in this child? Because by that point, everyone's a child to you.
And this is the problem with only going to high school through like 200-300.
There is a book called Hunted about a druid that does the person over 1,000 years old pretty well. So I want to give kudos to that book. But if you're going to have a long-lived character, one of the ways you make them believable is giving them the weight of those years and not just, the lingo of today and the mindset of today.
And before I turn this over to Fedora, who's been patiently waiting, I'm going to say another example, a good example, television-wise, to see this is the old TV show Highlander.
I was going to say that.
I knew you would, because Adrian Paul handled it well as the actor, and the writers did a fantastic
Well, and some of the
job.
characters they threw out there had horrible times with their immortality. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out
Go ahead.
that even characters which are supposed to be much bigger than life and much more intelligent, say, like Sherlock Holmes and like Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective, they have flaws too. Sherlock Holmes takes the 7% solution, and he gets easily bored when he doesn't have a case at hand. And Hercule Poirot often complains that his little gray cells are deserting him, and he can't figure the crime out until often very late, and fortunately very late in the story. But he has his problems too, even though he's a genius.
What is the 7% solution?
Cocaine.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, it's because Sherlock Holmes was taking a 7% solution of injectable
cocaine.
cocaine between cases.
When he was bored.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Lady.
I wanted to mention, like in my book, Brocula, who's one of the older vampires that they know of at the time until later on, which hasn't gotten written yet. Spoiler alert. He tends to slip into his old world fashion of talking or mannerism. So, and then sometimes he's up to date, but he'll let some of those old habits of the time period he actually grew up in slip out. And I actually had a reviewer comment that they didn't know whether the book took place in present day or the past because of this.
Oh, that's really cool. I was going to say, my mom, when she's back in Texas, her southern accent comes out. We live in the Midwest. Like, the news people accent is a normal here. But, like, when you get around those places or those people that remind you of how you grew up, you slip into those habits. Same as with family visiting. You slip into that old role.
Okay. I was going to toss out there another iconic character. Almost as iconic as Sherlock Holmes. And that is Batman. How can he defeat Superman? I am Batman. How can he defeat this guy? I am Batman. But in actuality, there was a comic book back, I want to say the 60s, I believe it was dealing with racism, where they basically come up to him. He's solved whatever crime it is he's working on. But they come up to him and say, we need your help. Why are you not here helping us do this? And he goes, he's literally almost blank-faced going, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing he could do as Batman.
Who came up to him? Just be specific here.
I just want to try and remember the actual social group that came up to him. And I don't...
And it was race-related, right?
I believe it was race... I'm pretty positive it was race-related.
It was African-Americans that
Thank
came
you.
up to him.
Thank you. I didn't want to say it and be wrong.
No. I remember reading about this and seeing a panel. It was confronting racism in a Batman comic, which is something that comics have done.
Yeah.
Bringing up racism, sexism, homosexism, and issues to kind of humanize people that usually are put at a distance at those points in time, so that treating them poorly was okay.
Back on the issue of making super characters more human.
Characters,
Yeah, I was, again, thinking of Doctor Who. They tend to make practically immortal characters into very selfish people in some ways and others. Like, not quite sociopaths or psychopaths, but close. But there was a character recently this season that's not a major spoiler, but the character goes by the name of Me. And she started out as a human.
Doesn't go by the name of Melanie.
No, Me. M-E. But point is, she's a normal human, except she lives for a very, very, very long time. And, in fact, she made it to the end of the universe. But and I suspect there'll be a spin-off comic that has her as a main character in it soon. But she doesn't have enough brain cells and memory to actually remember back all that time. So her memory is extremely fragmented, and she remembers what happens recently, but she doesn't remember her childhood. She doesn't remember even 1,000 years ago. And at this point in the story, she's a couple billion years old, so, you know.
I'd like to bring up Harry Potter as far as believability. Specifically the Harry Potter trio main cast. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley. All three of those characters are extremely flawed.
Aww.
Extremely flawed. But they all have strengths that we recognize and appreciate them for. They definitely have differing opinions on certain matters. They face problems, Voldemort, and challenges, Voldemort, ministry, school. They have a lot of problems at school that are common to people as far as the school problems. Yeah, we've all had teachers we didn't like. We've all had classes we didn't like. We've all had teachers we loved or felt, you know, like they were a mentor to us. But one of the ones I wanted to bring up specifically was Book 5 of Harry Potter. Harry speaks in caps lock. He is the epitome of a spoiled, rotten, angry, angsty teenager. I hate him in that book. I hate him. He just will not shut up about having done everything by himself, with no help from Hermione, who is way smarter than him, or Ron, who, you know, sticks by him even when he's kind of a jerk, and when he's never going to be the first fiddle. He's always going to be second fiddle to Harry. So Harry in Book 5 is not likable. He needs to be punched in the throat. But I see him and I recognize him as a person because he's acting believable given all that has just happened. He has watched someone die, someone be murdered because of him. He feels responsible in some ways, in a way that he never has before, for all the problems that are like coalescing around him. So as much as I dislike him in that book, I still feel for him, and I still like him as a character. And being able to see him be flawed and be affected by the situation that is going on, that is only getting worse, helped me like the books themselves even more. So having a character that is flawed, that does things that you don't like, doesn't make for a bad book. In some cases, it's necessary to make for a good book or a good series. If you don't have a flawed character, there's no conflict around them, and they're boring. Superman is not as compelling as Batman to most people, because Superman has so many strengths and of a moral and a physical variety that nothing touches him but kryptonite, which there is short supply of. So the only way to Superman is through his emotions, through Lois Lane, that one person, or through kryptonite, one space rock. Batman, on the other hand, we absolutely adore, and his rogues gallery is crazy. He is extremely flawed. He is driven. He is human in a world of superheroes. Human. Extremely breakable. Squishy human. Good fighter. Good detective. Really smart, but squishy. So, having a flawed character doesn't make you a bad writer or make for a bad book. It actually makes for a more compelling read for your readers.
One of the great flawed characters, for anyone who's a George R. R. Martin fan out there, is Tyrion Lannister. He's probably got more flaws than good qualities. And yet over the course of umpteen seasons and however many books, he's probably the one character in the entire series that if you killed him off, we would hate you more, George. Because he is the best character in terms of, you know, everyone you see around you. And his flaws almost become cherished qualities.
Like when you love someone, the things that make you want to punch other people are just cute.
Time for another.
Maybe our final
wake
The
break.
final wake.
The final week.
An important wake break, because these are the books that Agatha Christie said that were her own personal favorites, okay? And if you haven't read them, boy, you definitely ought to read them. I haven't read quite all of them, but I've read most of them. Number 1, what you've all agreed on already, And Then There Were None. 2, Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which I read, but I don't remember it nearly as well as I do a lot of her other things. 3, A Murder is Announced, which has a very clever plot.
I don't remember if I've read that one.
It's a wonderful TV show. Oh, by the way, Then There Were None is going to have a news BBC version done this coming year.
Wow.
This coming year.
Lee, pay attention.
Oh, yes. We're going to have to watch that. 4, Murder on the Orient Express. 5, The 13 Problems. That is a short story collection, I think, which I have not read.
Yeah, that's the Labors of Hercules.
Oh, the 13 labors of Hercules.
12 labors of
the
Hercules.
12, yeah.
Okay. Towards Zero. I have not read that.
Me neither.
Endless Night was about the last thing that she wrote. Crooked House, which I have read, and it's great fun. Ordeal by Innocent, which I have read. And The Moving Finger, which is very, very much about, the moving finger of fate. And oddly enough, her favorites, my favorite of all, is one that Brad mentioned earlier, and it's not even in her top 10.
I know.
And it is Death on the Nile, or Murder in the Nile. It's sometimes called both.
I think
love
my
that.
high school did that one as a play.
Could be. It's quite famous. And we have A Little Toast.
Clink, clink, clink.
Clink, clink, clink.
Here's to you, Agatha Christie. You are the queen of crime, no doubt about it.
Go ahead.
I think we covered wanting something in every scene. Our waiter friend wants to put that glass down and get back to their job.
Yes.
Our final thing that we won't have much time to talk about at all is testing characters by throwing obstacles in their way and giving them pain they must endure. Any final thoughts about that?
We did mention that we did a whole episode on that too.
Yes,
did.
we did.
We did. I'll just sum it up then with one thing. The whole role of the obstacles is to break the facade of a character. We all, be it a fictional character or you who are listening to this radio program, us sitting around here, we all have our facades. We all have our images of who we are.
Facades?
Facades.
Okay.
Did I mispronounce?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Okay. We all have the facade. And it's not until we face some of the challenges that come about in our lives, or if we're writing a fictional character in the fictional story, that we can really see what lies underneath that mask. And find out who we really are, who we really want to be, and maybe what we never wanted to be but were for a while. Something to think about. And on that note, once again, tune in for the contest. Please help out. And have a great week writing. Thank you. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is an online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.